I think of myself as sort of a social systems engineer, somebody that can build organizations and people and talent. You can have a few good ideas, but if you're not constantly refreshing them, pivoting, adapting, those ideas will eventually become obsolete.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Scott Wood, and I'm here with Fernando De Leon, founder and CEO of Leon Capital Group. Welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. So what's going on today?
What's going on today in the world?
Yeah, here in Dallas, in the world.
Well, first, I think in Dallas there's a lot of growth. I ran into a guy who runs the Economic Development Corporation at one of the cities in around the Metroplex, and he told me they had 25 LOIs signed for corporate relocations.
Is that right?
So that's kind of what I think is going on around town.
Wow.
Is a tremendous amount of job creation, companies relocating from mostly coastal markets, I think.
Yeah.
And so the story of Dallas, I got here in 2003 from New York, and for 22 years, I saw the population go from like 4.25 million to 8.5 million, depending on how you count the Metroplex.
Yeah.
So I think the story of Dallas is that it's population growth.
Pretty incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Tell us about Leon Capital Group quickly, and then we'll go into your background.
Sure. Leon Capital, I founded it about 20 years ago. It's a holding company, a privately owned holding company that operates 12 different subsidiaries. And those 12 different subsidiaries are in, 3 of them are in real estate, 6 of them are in healthcare, and 3 of them are what we call financial services. So in financial services, in real estate, we have a healthcare real estate business, an industrial business. Mm-hmm. So we develop warehouses and logistics space in the Sun Belt and in Europe. And in the apartment business, we also develop multifamily across the Sun Belt. And we've been doing that for 2 decades. We're one of the largest private apartment developers in the country. We build about $1 billion of apartments a year, about 3,000 to 4,000 units every year. And then in the healthcare subsidiary, we own 6 companies. Some of them are consolidation plays, some of them are organic growth plays, but they're in categories like ophthalmology, dental, mental health, med spa. We operate the largest chain of med spas in the country.
All right.
And then in financial services is sort of a catch-all. We have an insurance business. We have a consumer lending business that was sort of an outgrowth of the healthcare business. So we started originating financing for our customers at our healthcare clinics. And then we also have essentially a GP stakes investment business where we invest in RIAs, in asset managers, investment management companies in various categories. So
Great.
From wealth management to oil and gas.
Awesome. All right. Well, we got a lot to talk about. All right. So let's dig in. So where are you from?
Where am I from? That's a little bit complicated.
I know. I've read a little bit of the bio. But
let me see if I can come up with a coherent view. Look, I lived in Mexico. Throughout my upbringing as a kid and through high school. So I lived on the Mexican side, but I commuted daily to school in the United States. So I went to school in Brownsville, and for a period of time there, from about 6 years old to about 14. I went to school both in the United States in the morning and in the evening in Mexico. So I commuted every day, and I went to school sort of from 8 to 3 in the U.S. and then from 4:30, 5 o'clock to about 8 o'clock in the evenings in Mexico. So it's sort of a very interesting, kind of evolution for me and pretty formative to be able to kind of straddle 2 countries and 2 cultures.
So what years was that? Like grade years that you did that back in?
So I did that from, kindergarten to
all the way through high school.
Through freshman year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were your parents sort of influential in saying, "Hey, you're gonna go to the U.S. and then you're gonna come back and go to school in Mexico in the afternoons," or was that you, or how did that come about? Because that's very unusual.
Yeah, it is. It's slightly unusual. There were a number of people that did that with me growing up.
Okay.
A few that I can recall. So it wasn't, that unusual. But I think my mother was always, hey, the United States is this extraordinary place for opportunity, and you need to have your eye on building a sort of an American dream. I was the only one in my family that had both been born in the United States and also gone to school in the U.S. So I had this sort of golden ticket that my family really said, hey,
you're the one.
You're the one. You get this great opportunity in the States. Go out and make something of it. And so I had this sort of accountability that I had to take that golden ticket, that opportunity, and do right by my family.
So you have brothers and sisters?
I got 5 siblings, yeah.
Okay, and so were they not born in the U.S.?
They weren't.
Okay.
They all sort of lived their lives entirely in
Mexico.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They've all since transitioned and become American citizens since then, but they didn't get they didn't get the opportunities that I did, and I was the youngest.
I was just saying, where are you in the birth? So you're the youngest.
So I'm the youngest, and by a lot. So I was. There was a piece in the Dallas Morning News a couple weekends ago, and the writer called me an oops baby. Cheryl Hall, who I love as a delightful human being, she called me an oops baby,
which happens,
which I think is the right connotation.
So your parents, had they moved to the U.S. at that point?
No, they stayed. We always stayed in Mexico, and so we lived on the Mexican side of the border. But I was born in the United States. I was born in Texas. And I was the last one. So my siblings were significantly older than me, 10 to 16 years older than me.
Okay, wow.
So it was a big transition. I was the last one, and I was born in the States. And that was, extraordinarily formative in the trajectory of my life.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump ahead, and then we'll come back. But you said, this was your parents really instilled this responsibility that you had to really go, create and make something. Have you been able to sort of manifest that forward, and then, be able to provide and help siblings and family and mom and dad now?
Well, my dad passed away when I was a kid, so I was young. So I didn't, but everybody in the family, all the older siblings were very paternal figures.
Yeah.
We are an extraordinarily close family, and we get together every Sunday and spend time together.
So a bunch of them are here.
Yeah, a bunch of them are here, and we're very, very extraordinarily close.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so you graduate from high school in Brownsville and in Mexico.
Actually, I only graduated from high school in Brownsville.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I stopped. I couldn't do the two schools by the time I got to high school.
Right,
the
you
curriculum,
stopped freshman year.
The curriculum was a little too complicated, and I was playing sports, and I was I was the captain of my basketball team. Which is not a very competitive part of the world, but we.
Well, and you and I are about the same height, so
I was a point guard. I was a good passer. I feel like I still am. I'm sort of a team builder, player coach is how I like to think of myself.
Yeah,
and so high school. I went to a place called St. Joseph's Academy, which is an incredible school. We actually have our family foundation has a scholars program, the De Leon Scholars, which that is one of our target schools, and we support students there for both high school and college scholarships, and so that school was incredibly formative. They have an incredible track record of sending students to great universities around the country, and so the curriculum was very sophisticated, and I was well prepared, and also it had helped that I, by being bilingual,
right?
So it was kind of an interesting thing. By being bilingual, the SATs have two parts. It has the verbal and the math.
Correct.
So verbal, I had been in the spelling bee. I had represented South Texas in the national spelling bee and done fairly well doing that in my elementary years and a little bit of junior high. And so verbal sort of came to me easily because I had, word etymology and word meanings and roots through Spanish and Latin and through my study of the spelling bee. So that was helpful. And then, ironically, my classes and my schooling in Mexico was much more advanced in mathematics.
Interesting.
And so when I got to high school, I was very well prepared for both math and reading comprehension and verbal, which was critical for the SATs and for college admission.
Yeah. So then where'd you go to college?
So because of that, I was pretty well positioned. I got a full scholarship to go to Harvard as an undergrad.
Yeah.
And so I got there in 97. I graduated in 2001. I was one of those early years of what today is called behavioral economics, but at the time there wasn't a definition for it. And so I studied biology and economics, and I combined the two, and that's what I spent my time on.
So was how instrumental was the school that you attended in the U.S.? I'm guessing that you did well on the SATs, and the school you said earlier, had a really good track record of helping kids get into really great school. So was it that combination? You think that?
I think so. I think so, and I think I had, I had spent those years kind of thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, right? I mean, I grew up in a complicated part of the world.
Correct.
The border.
Yeah.
The border is, and I was talking to your assistant Stephanie earlier. She grew up on the border as well, and those borders are complicated places, right? I mean, they have culture clashes, they have economic clashes, they have the movement of goods,
right,
movement of people. These things are very complicated for the sociology of the place, of the context, right?
Yeah.
And so I grew up around that, and you can imagine that was not an easy place. There was violence, there was all sorts of things happening in that environment. And so those were very formative. And so when I wanted to go to Harvard, I said, I want to learn, I want to continue to study sort of human behavior. Why are the people in this particular part of the world acting this way? Why do these systems form?
Right.
I had been contrasting the American system and the Mexican system for many years, intuitively, right?
Right.
I mean, when
watching it happen.
Just watching it happen in the morning, you've got this algorithm processing information in Spanish. You cross a border, then you have to process it in English, and your algorithm, your mental algorithm, is training on that data constantly and saying, I react this way, I react that way. And the governance system of those two systems, of the United States and the Mexican system, were very different. And so I said, this is a superior system, an operating system. So,
right.
This was DOS, whereas the other system was a paper-based processing system.
Right.
And so I kind of contrasted those. My brain trained on this information, and so at an early age, I started thinking about behavior, social governing systems, and then I said, I want to spend my time thinking about that and learning about that in an academic context. And so when I got to speak to Harvard admissions people, that's what I told them, and I think they were smitten by the idea that I could speak to them on those terms.
Well, such a unique story too, right? You born in the U.S., grew up in Mexico, lived in Mexico, commuting back and forth across the border for the first 15 years of your life daily, and then evaluating these systems. I mean, it's a great, if I was a Harvard admissions person, I'd be like, yeah, we want this guy.
I'm on that committee now.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I do the interviews for the university here in North Texas, and you're right. I mean, I would be interested in having that person, that young man or woman, go out there and pursue this. What was particularly interesting to me was that you could take a human being, right? You could take John Smith, or Juan Garcia, and you could put that same human being in one context, and their productive output would be 4. And then you could put that same human being on the northern side, on the true north side of an arbitrary boundary that was a river. You could put that same human being, and their productive output would be 40. And so why?
Right.
And so I wanted to think about that. I was like, I want to understand this.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time reading and writing about that particular concept.
And what did you conclude?
Oh, man. Well, what I concluded was that I would build companies where I could create incentives. So I think of myself as sort of a social systems engineer, somebody that can build organizations and people and talent, and then deploy the right governance and the right incentives to build companies. And so I've dedicated my life, or at least over the last 20, 25 years, to building these 12 companies. Actually, we've built 16. We've sold 4.
Yeah.
These 12 operating businesses all constitute, sort of a lifetime of thinking about governance, incentives, talent, and organizing principles that allow us to create the highest productive output out of any strategy.
Are any of your businesses do business in Mexico?
No,
they're all here.
No, and intentionally.
Yeah, intentionally.
Intentionally, yeah. I mean, I think there is no place. Actually, going back to the Dallas question, and I would posit this question to you as a connoisseur of entrepreneurship. Also, I would ask you this question. When I think about the world, right? First of all, there is no place where two systems are so different as the United States and Mexico. The only place you could probably see it that is more stark is probably North and South Korea. But apart from that, there is no other place where the economic discrepancy between two societies is as stark. And so when I think about, where to invest, I say, well, if I thought about Asia and China, do I really own my property in China?
Right.
And the answer is probably no.
Right.
There is no system that allows private ownership in China. It's a communist system. If I asked, do I want to invest in Europe? I would say, well, the Western European countries have terrible demographics. They have declining fertility rates and substitution rates that are abysmal. If I thought about Africa, I think there is no energy, there's no power, there's no economic system undergirding ideologically the fomenting of entrepreneurship. If I thought about Latin America, the political systems are disruptive. They're left of center, far left of center, throughout all of Venezuela and even Brazil today, and Argentina and Chile have had terribly destructive economic policies. I spent a little bit of time with the current president of Argentina recently at the presidential inauguration, and we talked a little bit about this, and I think he's doing a lot to correct it, but I would not touch the Latin American economies with my dollars. So when I think about it, I say, okay, well, United States, best place in the world to invest. Sort of not a controversial thing.
Right.
But if you peel back more and more, let's say where in the United States? And then I would say, well, in the United States, would I pick the Rust Belt to deploy my capital? And I'd say probably not. Then I would say, well, what about the coastal markets, New York and Los Angeles, San Francisco? And I don't like the governance of those jurisdictions, so I would stay away. And the cost of living and the ability to recruit talent is limited. So then I would say, okay, well, there are places like Phoenix and Dallas and Austin and Atlanta and Miami that have, and Charlotte and Raleigh that have these great
vibrant
economic growth engines. And then I would say, well, where are they mostly diversified? And so I would say, well, I don't like sort of the reliability of the over reliance of Phoenix on certain categories. I don't like it in Atlanta, and then I would say in Texas, the best state in the country to invest in is Texas. I would look to Houston and Dallas and Austin as the primary recipients of my capital, and then I would say, well, Houston is overly reliant on energy. Austin is a smaller city with about 1.5 million people. So in terms of the talent pool where I can recruit from to build organizations, I would look to Dallas. And so it's hard to make a case that North Texas is not the greatest recipient of economic investment.
Hard to argue
in the world. You'd be stretched. You'd have to squint to make a counter argument.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Okay, before we leave, I want the border, right? And how you grew up. Can you comment on the border just briefly about kind of what's been going on the last, couple, 3-4 years, and then where we are today? And do you have an opinion? I'm sure you have an opinion, but just maybe a little bit of perspective, because you offer a unique perspective.
Yeah. Well, I would go back to, I spend my time studying evolutionary biology, so I think about these things. The movement,
Systems,
movement of people.
Yeah.
I think about it in the context of, call it 100,000 years.
Yeah.
And the flow of people has always been driven by economics, whether it was harvesting agricultural production, climate, food, and opportunity. Today, that opportunity exists ideologically or philosophically, right? The procurement of a better life is mostly about a system. So it's not so much about food and agriculture. It's about ideas. And the United States has the best ideas in the world. We've had that advantage for about 250 years roughly. So the movement of people has always occurred militarily. What the border has always moved, right? And I have, for context, I have Irish ancestors who came in the mid 1800s to Galveston and then went south to what they thought was still the United States and then got moved to Mexico. Think about that.
Okay.
These were my ancestors. One of them, actually, I have a birth certificate, was born in an area called unclaimed territory, which was before Texas was a republic in 1846. It was a part of Texas that was unclaimed by neither the Texas Republic, Mexican government, or the American government.
Interesting.
So you had this little spot. And I have an Irish ancestor named Martin Hale O'Malley, who was born in that little section of the earth.
Interesting.
So for historical context, these things are always pretty fluid, right?
Yeah.
And so we can't get, too crazy or ideological about it because there's always, historical circumstance. And as I said earlier, there is no other place where the difference between one side and the other is as stark, with the exception of obviously North and South Korea. But, Germany and France, Russia, Mongolia, Thailand, Vietnam, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Guyana, no border in the world. The other one that is arguable too is also the Dominican Republic and Haiti have pretty stark economics on an island, but very few places.
Yeah.
So we will always have people that want to come to the United States for obvious reasons. The policies matter.
Yeah.
The policies of the last 4 years were pretty unhinged and terrible, right? I mean, there are very few people on either side of any and this is not a political statement. I mean, you talk to anybody on any side of the political spectrum today in Mexico or in the United States on any party, and they would tell you that the policies of the previous 4 years were not good. It was a pretty chaotic border. As a matter of fact, even if it was trying to help immigration, the policies of the Biden administration, they actually hurt immigration because now you have this backlash, right? And so you don't help anybody by being dysfunctional.
Right.
It's like trying to be a nice guy in a company. You don't do anything. You're going to lose margin. You're going to lose the business, and then you're going to lose people. So if you thought you were, giving people, free products or free money, you did the opposite of what you intended to do.
Right.
So for whatever reason, the policies of the previous administration were chaotic, dysfunctional, and the border was a mess.
Yeah.
It was a mess. And so I think what you saw was people naturally wanting to come to the United States, no surprise.
Yeah.
And then chaotic policies that were completely not managed. I mean, these were, government has to have managers and leaders that have clear ideas, and there was no clarity. There was no thought given to anything.
Right.
I think a lot of times as citizens, we think that there's somebody making a lot of good decisions somewhere, and that was not the case, at least in that case.
Yeah, we hope that's the case.
We hope that's the case, but it's not always the case. And so you saw pretty dysfunctional policies. I think today the border is a much more organized process for people to come here. And then you also did have a lot of, certain South American countries were sending people from their jails and from their prison systems, and they were offloading them on the United States. And I think the United States has every right to push that back and say, hey, we can't take people with criminal records, and we've got to send them back. And so I think some of that is getting solved for. The story of the United States from Irish and Polish and Italian immigrants at the turn of the century is a story of immigration.
Yeah.
Without it, everybody, right? I mean, every single person in the world, in the United States, comes from an immigrant background by definition, including the president's wife and the son of the president's immigrant wife, and the president's grandfather or great grandfather who came from Germany, and including your ancestors and mine. And so this is a nation that, unless you're a full Native American, everybody else is an immigrant.
Yep, that's right. Well, it's been interesting. We talked before we got started, and we've done 70 or 80 of these podcasts, and it's amazing how many first-generation immigrants have sat in this chair right here. And talked about the opportunity in America, and it's still very much alive and well. And
I believe 72 or 76% of all new businesses are created in America by immigrants or the children of immigrants.
Interesting.
3/4.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that statistic. Fantastic. All right, so we go to Harvard, right? We do our 4 years at Harvard, behavioral economics, and then what?
I got recruited to go work at Goldman Sachs in the investment banking group, and I went to 85 Broad Street. I was there for a couple of years and learned a lot. I mean, the capital markets, it's a bird's eye view of the capital markets. So I was very fortunate to have this great view of the way capital flowed.
Let me pause you for 1 second. Okay, so when you're in high school, you're starting to look at these systems. Then you go to Harvard, you study the systems. Why Goldman Sachs? Why that decision? I mean, obviously it's a great opportunity. That's where everybody goes out of Harvard. But like, why for you, Goldman Sachs?
There was a while there where I wanted to be James Bond, so I wanted to go to the CIA, and so it was between Goldman Sachs and the CIA. And my brother Alfonso, he talked me out of it. He said, Fernando, man, you've got this idea. You're going to go work for the CIA. You're going to make no money. And you're not going to be James Bond.
And remember, you're the golden ticket.
And you're the golden ticket, dude. And you are going to be sitting in a desk in El Salvador, and you're going to be translating manuals from English to Spanish, and you're not going to be James Bond. So I suggest that you take the Wall Street job and go make some money for all of us, man. And so that's kind of what we did. And so it was between those two. But Goldman Sachs is a great place. Obviously, good brand, but I like the people there. They had really good energy. The people that recruited me were extraordinarily talented. Of all the people on Wall Street at the time, those were the ones I clicked with the most. And I knew that I would have a unique vantage point. That particular division I was in gave me a sort of a generalist view of a lot of sell-side mandates. So we were selling companies, all sorts of things that cement companies, framing companies, all sorts of things that I worked on that were that I knew that I would have a bird's eye view. And that's when I started to develop this sort of thesis around the supply chain of capital. And that's when I started understanding the way capital flowed through the American capital system.
And you were there a couple of years?
I was there a couple of years. I was a really bad analyst. I was actually really bad at my job. I learned a lot, but I was actually not very good at my job. And my boss at the time said, who's now a good friend of mine, he said, Fernando, you're going to be a client of this company, of this firm someday, an important client. But right now, you may be the worst analyst that Goldman Sachs has ever hired. And he was not wrong. So he got rid of me. Actually, he said, go do something else, man, because you're not set out for this. And so
why did he offer that? Like, in your assessment now, looking back, why were you not good at it?
I wanted to build a company. I had a very formative entrepreneurial experience as a kid. At about 14 or 15 years of age, I had been a translator. So I had been a translator for American real estate developers that were building warehouses and manufacturing capacity in Mexico under the North American Free Trade Agreement. So I had been a translator for some of these real estate developers. And I had made pretty good money doing it. I had sort of, helped them get building permits, jobs permits. And so I was an operator. And I went from being sort of a translator to being a quasi real estate developer, project manager. And so I said, man, I'm pretty good at this. I had taken my fees and rolled them into real estate projects and converted them to equity. And so I was a 15, 16-year-old kid with equity in a handful of real estate deals. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. So when he said that, and he and I had talked about that. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, you're right. And I'm just going to go do what I had been doing before. I'm going to go back to Texas, and I'll go do, real estate development the way I had sort of been involved in my younger years. And then I picked Dallas, which was the best decision I ever made.
All right. So when you were
second to getting married.
Yeah, of course. We're going to come back to that too. So when you left to go to Harvard, did you just kind of leave all that real estate development activity behind?
Yeah.
You had your equity interest.
I had my equity interest. I got cashed out of those while I was in college, and so I had some money in my pocket.
That's nice.
And when I was in New York, and I had been generating dividends, even at like 15, 16 years old, I had generated dividends from some of those real estate deals. And so I got bought out. Some of those properties got sold. And so when I came back, I had a little bit of capital.
So let me ask you a question. So I want to drill in on what made you make the decision to roll some of your fees into equity, and was that something that they offered to you, or is that something you asked for?
That's a good question. Nobody ever asked me that question. That's a good one, because there was a moment there, and it's a very specific moment. So here's what happened. They one developer in particular needed to get, we had the building permit, so we could build, but you couldn't build unless you could procure job permits.
Right.
So that means you had the right to employ people.
Right.
So the building permits were worthless if you didn't have the right to employ the people inside the facility.
Right.
So my grandmother actually knew the union leader, and so I knew that, and I went to my grandmother and I said, "Grandma, didn't you tell me one time that you knew the head of the union?" And she said, "Oh yeah. No, that guy, that man, he's been in love with me since we were kids." And I said, "Really?" I said, "I wonder if you could get me a meeting." She said, "I'll get you a meeting."
I can get you a meeting.
So she set it up. I showed up, and the head of the union was there, and I sit down with him, and I said, he asked me, "You're Amparo's grandson?" And I said, "Yeah." She set this up, and she's like, "Oh yeah. Now I know that woman. I've been in love with her since we were kids." I said, I think we're gonna get this
is gonna be good. Yeah,
it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, he signed on a little napkin, and we got that done. And I went to the developer and I said, "Hey, these job permits, you've been trying to get them for over a year."
I just got it.
Well, no. I said, "What would you pay if you could get those? If you could get those?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, I don't know. I think he said like $50,000." And I knew what the budget was.
Right.
So I just divided the price he would pay for the permits divided by the total budget to build the building, and that was 5%.
Okay. Yeah. And you said, "How about?"
Yeah, I said,
how about you just give me that 5% in equity in the project?
And that's exactly what I said. And he said,
so it was really your idea.
It was my idea, but he didn't have to come out of pocket to pay that, what he was willing to pay to facilitate it. He just had to add something to the cap table.
Yeah.
And I was running all of it anyway.
And he was in pain because he'd been trying to get it for a year. Yeah.
And so it was easy.
It's great.
And it was easy for him. It was a natural moment. And I just divided, the cost of it by the total budget, which I was running.
Yeah.
And that's how it came to be.
So I'm guessing that was a light bulb moment for you too. That was a decision point where you were like, "Okay, wow, now I see how this works."
That was, and I was 15 years old.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so you mentioned your wife a second ago.
Yeah.
Where did you guys meet?
We met in Dallas. I was 25 or so, and I had just come back from New York. Maybe I was a year from coming from New York, and I had tied up a piece of land in Pleasant Grove here in Dallas, which is not an easy part of the city. It was, but I had this piece of land that I was going to build a subdivision in, and the owner of the land was a gentleman by the name of Harold Pullman, who was about kind of mid 80s at the time, and he had this piece of land that he had never been able to develop because it had a creek going through it. And so I had it under contract at a pretty big discount because nobody had been able to develop it, including him. He was a developer who had come back from World War II, actually, and built homes for GIs in Dallas. And so I hit it off with him. And at the grand opening of that subdivision that I had gotten it done. I had solved all of the floodplain issues, and it was under construction. He had rolled equity into the project.
Yeah.
And he was my partner on the deal. And he was very, I was very grateful to him. He was very happy to be in business with me because nobody had solved this piece of land. And he comes in, and he talks about how his wife is not doing well, but that he believed in me as a person that could get things done. And then I sort of start to talk about how he believed in my ability to solve this problem. And I got a little bit emotional because he had believed in me, and he had rolled value into
this. Was your first real project post Goldman? Or?
Yeah, I would say it's probably first or second. Yeah. But it was certainly early days.
Yeah.
And so as I got emotional, I was really kind of taken by the situation. And this beautiful woman comes over afterwards and says, that was really sweet that you got choked up talking about Mr. Pullman. And I said, no, I totally agree. I think we should definitely talk about that a little bit further, and maybe we could do that over dinner. And so that's how that flowed.
And what was her connection to why was she there?
She was there on behalf of the school district. She worked for the Dallas Independent School District, and she was also had a freelance job as a second job as a marketing person for the people that we were selling lots to home builders, and so she was involved in the project.
Okay, great.
So she had 2 jobs.
Awesome.
So.
And then you guys have children?
We do. We got 4 kiddos, and they're all 15, 12, 9, and 7.
Okay. So full house.
Full house.
You got a lot going on.
She's got a lot of jobs.
Okay, so on that particular project, well, first let's go back. How did you pick Dallas? Right? Like, I mean, obviously you probably wanted to come back to Texas.
I did.
How did you pick Dallas?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be in New York, too big. I couldn't make a life or a business for myself in such a big market. But I didn't want to go back home.
Why?
Well, New York is, cutthroat, very competitive, kind of small fish, giant pond. I wanted to have an impact, and I wanted to be relevant in a marketplace. And so back, home, South Texas was too small. So you had these 2 kind of bookends. And I said, what's a city that has good ideas, good policy, is centrally located so I could recruit people from various markets. And DFW had this great diversified economy. I had done a deal at Goldman here, so I knew a little bit about the city. And I just figured, it had to be Texas.
Yeah.
And of all the cities in Texas, this had I thought, the best human capital component, the best ability to recruit talent for whatever business I wanted to build.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent 3 years in New York after I graduated from college, and I had a similar experience. Like, I just thought it's an amazing place, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's too big, right? And I just, the social systems and the, like, how do you navigate
exactly
all, everything that goes on there, it just seemed like it was too big, right? Yeah. And Dallas was like very much, okay, I can figure this out.
I can figure this out. Exactly. That's kind of what I said. I can figure this out. And it also had it felt like it had this momentum, like this mojo that was just moving forward. And it proved to be prescient. So I think when I got here, it was like 4.25 million people, and now it's 8.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So if you're in the real estate business and you got 4 million new human beings, you're building a lot of apartments, a lot of homes, a lot of warehouses to distribute things to them, and so it's the perfect place to build real estate businesses.
Yeah. So going back to that first deal, second deal with this gentleman, how did you capitalize that deal?
Some of it was his equity, a little bit was mine. I syndicated it a little bit. And so early days, I mean, you just kind of strung it together, figured out how to get things done.
Yeah.
There was no formula. It was just like, figure out whatever you can do. So a little bit of rollover equity, a little bit of savings I had, and then, a little bit of syndication. But, we've been at this for 20 years or so. And now, the power of compounding is such that
it's real.
That those
it's real.
those early days. I mean, if you take where we took those projects and the early savings and capital that was in those projects, and you take it to today at our compound interest, it's just been an incredible ride.
All right, so from there, just sequential real estate projects, kind of one after another for a few years, and then walk us through the timing of kind of moving from that to some of these other businesses and the evolution of that. And then I do want you to talk a little bit about, do you think of Leon Capital as a family office? I mean, back 20 years ago, really people didn't talk about family offices, but is that part of your vernacular, or we're really, Leon Capital Group is really a collection of operating businesses, and that's how we think about it.
Yeah, so I think it's the latter. I mean, the family office nomenclature is tricky, right? I mean, it connotes a second generation, it's passive and all that. I mean, we are operating businesses. I think of ourselves as a diversified holding company. And when we get covered by the large bulge bracket banks, we get covered not as a family office and not as a private equity sponsor. We get covered as a family-owned diversified holding company that has 12 operating subsidiaries that do M&A, that tap the capital markets for growth, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think about it that way. And the story of how we evolved from a real estate business, it's pretty interesting because there were times when we were owning, a warehouse or a shopping center with multi-tenants, right? And what I realized we were doing when we were looking at who was our tenant in a warehouse or our tenant in a shopping center was we were underwriting credit.
Right.
We were looking at P&Ls. We were looking at top line margins. We were structuring credit, a credit product, and we realized that we could dissect the financial statements of any given business. And so there were early years, 16, 17 years ago, where we would take stakes in some of those businesses. So we would own a veterinary business. One of those businesses was here in Dallas called CityVet. And we took early equity, then we bought majority, then we grew it. Then I leveraged our real estate capabilities to develop other sites and grow the business. So if it had 5 locations, I could own that dental business and then say, okay, real estate guys, give me another 20 locations.
Right.
I could generate operating profits from the real estate development, sell those sites, generate a profit, reinvest that into the operating company. So I thought about PropCo and OpCo. And so I had fuel to grow these businesses that way. And so I had a mousetrap and I had a playbook that I could apply. And so we got to a point where we've grown these businesses. Insurance, for instance. Insurance was this business that was, it bothered me that in our real estate, I was paying so much. I started to understand the supply chain of it. I realized there were agents and brokers and reinsurers. And so we built a captive, and then we built agency businesses in order to control that cost of P&C, property and casualty, for our real estate holdings. And then it became a business.
Right.
And then we took stakes in other insurance companies, and then we started growing our balance sheet business. And so we gradually learned by necessity. Everything was like that. When we saw that our customers, our patients in a med spa or an ophthalmology clinic or a mental health facility needed treatment, but the capital markets, their lenders, Capital One or Wells Fargo, couldn't or wouldn't finance them, I stepped in to finance them. And I said, okay, we'll originate loans from creditworthy people, and we'll originate those loans. Sometimes we'll hold them on balance sheet, or we'll securitize and sell them and forward flow them. And so we learned to do these things by necessity. and they were natural outgrowths of everything we can control in terms of distribution, and they became very worthwhile and self-sufficient businesses across a multitude of categories.
And so now, like, you've got 12 businesses, 12 operating units
that we control and operate.
Okay.
There are
other interests.
Yeah, we have probably 20 interests in other investment managers, asset managers, wealth managers, RIAs, technology companies. There's a beautiful business in real estate technology that I'm immensely proud of called Crexi, that is the second largest commercial real estate data provider in the United States.
Okay.
We employ about 400 people. I co-founded the business and we incubated it, and it turned into this giant company today that is an incredible. It's got this incredible growth record. I look at the financials this morning on Q1 and beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, what's the plan? Like, do you want to hold these companies and continue to grow them? Is there an exit individually along the way for some of them? Like, how do you think about the evolution of the portfolio?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, a couple of things that I think are worth noting. Number one is, you can have a few good ideas, but if you're not constantly refreshing them, pivoting, adapting, those ideas will eventually become obsolete.
That's right.
So we are constantly innovating new businesses and new strategies. And yes, sometimes we sell businesses, sometimes we recapitalize businesses, sometimes we hold them forever. So it just depends. I have a partnership with Hillwood and Ross Perot, and I'm looking at their building here. And we went to Europe about, I guess, 15 years now, 2010 or 11. And we're in the European logistics business. And, we talk about holding that business forever. And it'll be hopefully a 100-year business for our grandchildren. But so we think about some as long-term holds. We think about some as recapitalization. And then the second thing that I would point out is that as our businesses grow, one thing that became very important to me was to begin to formalize the ability to bring partners in through an investment management capability and bringing in partners. And I wish I would have done it sooner because, even like the fact that I'm talking to you is because we have connectivity with the wealth management community, the RIA community, and that's because we have begun to bring investors, both endowments and RIAs and institutional investors. And now that they are our partners in some of our strategies, they also bring two things. They bring deal flow, so they constantly introduce us to people. To deals, and then also to people. So they sometimes bring, people that I can recruit to help us scale businesses. There's a great friend, a guy named Greg Foman, who introduced me to somebody who's helping us scale our insurance business. And so people like that, and so I wish I would have started to bring in a lot more investors and partners
earlier
on a systematic basis or formulaic basis on a lot earlier.
You still have time.
Yeah, I do.
There's still plenty of time.
There is plenty of time.
Yeah. So tell me, I'm curious, like, what's the interest in the RIA space and the asset management space? I mean, obviously that's the space we're in. So I'm curious your thinking there.
Well, I guess I'll tell you something that you probably think about regularly, but I think about it similarly, but in a historical context. I think about the formation of wealth, the creation of wealth in the United States in the post-World War II era. So when I think about capitalism, it's a relatively new idea. So if you take, the Bolsheviks in 1917 in Russia were still, coming to power. That's 100 years ago, right? We were in the Cold War. It didn't end until the late 80s, early 90s. We were still debating the merits of capitalism 30 years ago. There are still countries in the world that don't uphold capitalism, that create capitalism as a root cause of the wealth creation in the entire industrialized world is a relatively new phenomenon. And so we've created, in the United States, from what I can tell, about $100 trillion of net household wealth. Some economists have it at 150, depends on home prices, everything, right, that we own as Americans. There's a tremendous amount of wealth, call it $150 trillion of wealth, net wealth. If you take all of that and accelerate it at a 6 to 9% compound interest for the next 30 years, that becomes $300 trillion of net household wealth.
Right.
And we need competent people, like True North,
Thank you.
to manage that wealth, right?
Right.
To manage that capacity.
Right.
And so how we allocate human beings and professionals to the American system, I would argue we have 3x too many lawyers in America, and we need more financial advisors,
Right.
and we need more people, more engineers, and we need people. So as we think about, we have about 195, 200 million people in the American labor force actively. How many of that should be in the financial advisory space based on the net wealth creation that is compounded over time?
Yeah.
I think about, an investment in a business that is in the wealth management space that is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. Obviously, there's M&A and there's organic growth, but man, I think the customers and the assets are very sticky, as you well know, and so you have this tailwinds that are not just a function of America, but a function of an ideological capitalism taking root in the Western world, in America, the best place in the world to invest. And when you put all those things together, it is a net positive effect for the growth of wealth management in the United States.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really good perspective. And obviously we've been in the business a long time, and we do see the tailwinds, and it's powerful. And I do think I think people need more options as it relates to how they can be taken care of from a wealth standpoint.
For sure.
All right, we're getting close to time here. Is there one parting sort of word of wisdom that you would share with a group of business owners or entrepreneurs that are sitting here listening to your story, and an incredible story, by the way?
I think that the business owners and the entrepreneurs can probably relate to what I'm about to say, and I think this is I wouldn't say it to them, but to the folks that are out there that are not business owners and entrepreneurs, I would say there's always something about the fear of the unknown and going into something different, and I think entrepreneurs and business builders generally take that fear and they tend to organize it and then cultivate it and then sort of leverage it, right? And so if you can organize that fear, whatever's troubling you or whatever you're fearful of, if you organize it and cultivate it so you can take it in, lean into it, and then leverage it to your benefit, I think that it seems to me that business builders and entrepreneurs, when they're doing things, that's sort of the muscle memory they utilize to build organizations, and so I think that's a pretty powerful predisposition. That
you would say you're not fearless. You're fearful from time to time, but you've just figured out a system of how to organize that fear.
I think that's right. I think all species of animals and all human beings are all fearful of something. If they're not, then they're probably not good at surviving.
That's right. Yeah.
Fear is a mechanism to protect yourself from threats. The question is, what do you do with it? Do you run away from it, or do you leverage it in a way that gives you an advantage so that you can become better and more proficient at adapting?
Well said. Fernando, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We'll have to have you back another time because I know there's more territory that we could cover.
Anytime, brother. Have me anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Decision Points.
It's good.
Good.